Yeah, great. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our South America webinar. I am Carolyn Ray. For those of you I haven't met, we're so glad you're here today. I absolutely love South America. I'm actually going to be going there in just a few weeks. So if you're on our mailing list, you know that we have a women's travel directory. It's the only one in the world. And what we're trying to do is feature women-owned, women-led businesses. And so every month we host a webinar on a different area of the world. So this is our 6th webinar this year, I believe. And we've covered off the Americas, and well, we've covered off everything on Europe, Americas. This is our first one on South America, and then we're taking a little break in July, and then we'll be back in August with Asia and India. And after that, the Caribbean. So we're just working our way around the world. And all of these webinars are recorded on our YouTube channel. So we are recording this. And then we also keep them on our website if you want to come and watch them later. And they're featuring, as I said, women business owners from our Women's Travel Directory. So each one of these speakers tonight, our panelists, will be our experts in their countries and the regions that they operate in, and are here to answer your questions and tell you anything you'd like to know. So this is intended to be conversational and fun. So we want to hear your questions. We want to hear, anything at all that you're interested in talking about. We'll do our best to answer your questions. And I've also spent quite a bit of time in South America. I'm happy to say Argentina, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Brazil, Panama. So I think between the 4 of us, we'll be able to cover off a lot of your questions today. So it's intended to be a nice little chat among us girls. Anyways, I want to start off by asking each of our speakers to introduce themselves. And Katie, I'm going to start with you and put you on the spotlight.
All right, that's okay. Hi, everybody. It's very nice to meet you all. My name is Katie Beckwith. I am the manager at Rebecca Adventure Travel, which is founded by Rebecca Brack. She is actually from Holland. She came to Ecuador 10 years ago. She was volunteering at a horse ranch, and she just loved the country, fell in love with the people and the culture. And because she worked at KLM before coming to Ecuador, she had a lot of friends and colleagues who would say, I'm going to Ecuador for a day or two, take me horseback riding. And then if they came back, it was like, well, I want to see Quito now. What else can I see outside of Quito? And that's really how everything started with Rebecca. And now it's been almost 9 years. We're one of the leading tour operators in Ecuador, and well, we just are very passionate, and I'm so grateful to have been able to connect with Rebecca, because I came to South America I came to Ecuador 14 years ago, and as a boutique DMC here for Latin America, we're experts on the Galapagos Islands, Ecuador, but we also offer Colombia, Costa Rica, Chile, and Peru. And my story here in Ecuador, after coming from Maine, started kind of with a life-changing experience, because at 28, I was diagnosed with cancer. And that was a really challenging time, but it made me realize the importance of living life to the fullest, cherishing every small moment, because you literally never know. And I just, after that recovery time, I had a lot of time to think, still thinking about a lot of things. And I just wanted to expand my knowledge on South America and Ecuador and help others in the form of travel, especially to come to a place as vibrant and healing as South America can be. So finding Rebecca and being a part of this amazing team is just a daily reward that I'm very thankful for. It combines my love of travel and desire to inspire others to travel. And the company here is built on the values of courage and adventure and transformation. And we believe that travel can be a force for good as well as for personal growth. And our mission is to do that with women, to provide a safe and enriching life-changing travel experience. And we are a B Corp certified tour operator. our commitment goes beyond providing, you know, just amazing trips, and it goes to prioritizing social and environmental responsibility and making meaningful connections. So that's us.
Amazing. And I had the pleasure of meeting Katie last August. I spent a month in Ecuador, and part of that was with you. So I'm sure we'll
Yeah,
talk about that.
yes, we will.
Marika, I'd love you to go next and talk a bit about Inca.
Thank you. My name is Marika Roberson, and Inca, it's International Nature and Cultural Adventures. And we began in 1976 when my father, Bill Roberson, took a sabbatical from teaching physics to travel South America, a continent that had fascinated him since the 60s. And he spent quite a bit of time, traveled all the way from the Darien Canal to Tierra del Fuego, and came back with stories of adventure and amazing people and encounters, and regaled my sister and I around the dinner table for the longest time. And we were like, you have to take us. So he went back the next year to the Galapagos to take the Galapagos Naturalist Guides course and became a certified naturalist guide. And the following year, he took my sister and I and a handful of intrepid travelers on a horseback trip across the Andes on what is now known as the Salcantay Trek. He was the first person to bring foreign travelers on this journey. And there was nothing there. We didn't see another foreigner till we got to Machu Picchu. It was really rugged. I was 15 and my sister was 17, and we were the camp crew. We did all the provisioning, all the shopping in the markets, bargaining with the women for the oranges, and creating all the supplies. And then we were cooking and camping and setting up the tents and just doing everything, just the three of us. It was definitely a trial by fire into what is adventure travel. We'd come from a river rafting background, so it wasn't totally unknown to us. But the amount of work and the altitudes and the temperatures, we would go get water from the stream, and that came from the melting glacier, which isn't there anymore, and bring it back to the
Mm.
camp. And there'd be, even sloshing, there'd be a layer of ice across the entire top of the bucket. It was so cold. Anyway, we survived that, got to Machu Picchu, took our first showers in 7 days at the hotel. It was unbelievable. It was absolutely transformational. And then the Galapagos were similarly transformational and rugged at the time. There was an airport, there was no infrastructure, very few vessels, and the travelers that came were, interesting, different types of people because they were inspired to go to these unique destinations. And we've remained friends with them since. It was just phenomenal experiences. And so we only now travel to 7 destinations worldwide, most of them in South America. And each has a distinct wow factor so that people come back with their hearts and minds expanded because of their transformational experiences. And our company was founded on my father's sabbatical experience of what travel can do to transform your heart. And we we value travel that is done well, that in an inspiring destination, rich in natural history and cultural history, because they are what brings a traveler's heart alive. And I keep saying that, but it's so true about it. And our trips are gift wrapped in a little luxury. So we prize content and comfort, and we put a lot of our luxury under the hood in the sense of paying attention to the details, curating everything in advance, and making sure that the traveler's experience is as seamless as possible. Because, I mean, you don't really know how good a travel company is until something goes wrong. And if a company is really good, you don't know that anything went wrong. It's just seamless no matter what happens. And that's the artistry, and that's what we all do. All of the panelists here do incredibly well, is that providing the travelers with an experience that will be rich and rewarding and seamless as possible. And
I love that. And also,
yeah,
you're both talking so much about purposeful travel and intentional travel. And why we travel. And I think it's a perfect segue into Chris and talking about her organization, I should say, which does some really exceptional work.
Chris, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I did mute that while I was trying to make sure I didn't make any noises while you all were talking. I was listening so closely. Anyway, Carolyn, thank you very much for having this and for giving us the opportunity to talk to people and tell folks what we do. I am the CEO and I'm on the board of directors of Conservation Volunteers International Program, which is such a long name. From here on out, I'm going to call it Conservation VIP. Okay. And we are a nonprofit. We're based in California in the US. And our mission is to help sustain some of the world's greatest landscapes, cultural heritage sites, and biodiversity. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on how we started. We are in the early 2000s, a couple of folks with natural resource backgrounds from Park Service and Forest Service traveled down to Patagonia, to Torres del Paine, to go hiking. This was their vacation. And when they got there, of course, they were wowed. I mean, it's stunningly gorgeous. And it was everything they expected it to be, except in one respect. And that is they went to hike and they knew that many of the people going there go there to hike. And the trails were absolutely terrible. They were in very bad shape. Most of the trails, had never been purposefully built. They were not maintained. And as a result, people went off trail. Now, having a bad trail may not sound like such a big thing to people who aren't hikers, but understand that it degrades the landscape. You start having erosion. And when you have people who don't want to hike on a muddy trail and they go around it, they step on the flora, they interfere with the fauna, and you're degrading a landscape that is very fragile. So they were kind of horrified. They went and spoke to the park superintendent and learned that the park managers were trying to take care of it on their own without any volunteer help, which was also stunning. Because in the US, we're accustomed to the idea that there are volunteer groups helping national parks. This is the premier national park of Chile. And if you ever see, advertisements for traveling, the most beautiful places in Chile, you're going to see this park in the picture. So they said, well, we could organize travelers to come down here and volunteer to help you on trails. And the response was, well, why would anybody do that? I mean, it was just almost beyond comprehension, because in Chile, there was no history of volunteering environmentally. In South America, I think it's fair to say that most volunteer work tends to be social services oriented, not environmentally oriented, certainly not back then. So they started organizing groups of volunteers. And a couple of years later, in 2007, I happened to be one of those volunteers. Now, I don't have a background in natural resource management. My background's in finance. So I spent my work life in an office. And I spent my free time as much as possible hiking, getting outside, being up in the mountains. And that's what I love to do. So I had always wanted to see the mountains in South America. And so had my husband. We saw a little notice in the paper about a volunteer group, and we figured, how hard can that be? And what a way to go. We don't have to figure out. Our Spanish language was, let's say, not good. We both can speak some Spanish, understand some Spanish, but we're not great. Okay. So we thought, okay, we don't have to worry about the language. How hard can trail maintenance be? And it sounds interesting. So we just signed on almost as a lark. We had such a good time. I mean, first of all, we really, really enjoyed the sense of accomplishment, trying to improve the trails. We loved the people we met, both on the trip and locally. And I couldn't believe the mountains, the glaciers, the icebergs. I mean, it was just like eye candy all week long. So we signed up again the next year and went back again the next year to volunteer on the trails there. And after that, the folks who were trying to start this nonprofit said, you know, Chris, we probably, if we're going to have a nonprofit, need somebody who knows something about finance and how to pay bills and things like that. Would you like to join our board and volunteer as our chief financial officer? So that's how I got involved with the organization. And now fast forward 17 years later, and we now support 10 destinations, and I'm now the CEO. And I'm still a volunteer. So I will say that it is a full-time volunteer job because 10 destinations, there's an enormous amount of work. We have a very tiny little staff, and most of our work in terms of administrative work is done by volunteers. Our trip leaders are volunteers. So we are a volunteer organization, and we really truly believe in volunteering. One of the things, though, is we know that we depend on travelers of goodwill to travel with us to accomplish our mission. So we have all of the challenges to meet that every travel operator has. Our folks have to enjoy the trip or they're never coming back. And we have many repeat volunteers, and we always need more volunteers because the more volunteers on our trips, the more we help the destinations. So we have to make sure people have a good time. We have to be sure they've got lodging that's satisfactory, that they're fed, that we watch out for all their safety issues. We communicate all the details of the trips, etc. I think one thing that distinguishes traveling with a nonprofit from other travel operators is that we are actually accountable as a nonprofit. In other words, a lot of people now want to travel responsibly. And I think people are aware of the challenges caused in the world by travelers. They want to do the right thing. They want to travel responsibly. But how do you figure that out? It's very hard. There's a lot of greenwashing, and it's very hard to get actual information on the impact of individual travelers when they go somewhere. Nonprofits are regulated, and we put out a lot of reports. We put out a trip report after every trip. We put out impact reports that at the end of the year will tell you how many trees we planted, what amount of trail we helped repair, how many photographs we're taking of sea turtles or releasing sea turtles. We put out a lot of information that will assure travelers that, in fact, what we're doing is helping the destination. And I think the other distinction is a lot of travel feels good. I mean, people do like to travel. That's why we're all here today, is because people like to travel. But with a nonprofit volunteer trip, you come back not only feeling good about the travel, but often feeling really good about yourself because it feels good to do something good. I mean, we know helping the destination. So there's also that sense of, wow, not only did I do good, but, and have a great time, but the place there welcomed me and appreciated what I did. And that's powerful. And it's probably what motivates many of us to keep going, because it's obviously a very hard thing to be in the travel industry, to organize trips, to keep people happy. That's a lot of work that all the tour operators know about, right? So why do we do it? We do it because we believe in it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say this whole and Katie, you could probably speak to why you became a B Corp, because this is pretty unique and special in the travel industry. There's only a few companies I'm aware of. I'm sure there are more that have become B Corps because of all the reporting, right? This is an effort to avoid the greenwashing that we see in the travel industry.
Yeah, greenwashing, any organization or agency that you're gonna see is all gonna scream and shout from the top of their lungs that they're sustainable and responsible. But how do you prove that? How do you know they really are? And that's what the greenwashing is where you see everyone talking about sustainability and responsibility, but how do you know they really are? And when you have a distinguished certification such as B Corp, I can tell you that it took us almost 2 years to get that certification, because the questions and the investigation that they do are so detailed and thorough, that it takes that long to be able to even get the certification. So we received ours in just this past February. And you know, it goes along with our purpose in travel, which is using travel as a force for good. And in every single one of our destinations or tour programs, we're working with the local communities, local guides, and travel with us is like seeing everything through a local, seeing the destination through a local's eyes. So that's something that I think we all share in common between Chris and Marika as well.
Yeah. And, you know, I think for me, South America, I think the first time I went to South America, it's probably 10 or 12 years ago. And the first place I went was Argentina. And it's really where I experienced with my own eyes the effects of climate change. And, you know, kind of became much more real to me when you can see the glaciers with, you know, see that they're receding. And as you said, Marika, you went, some of them aren't there anymore. You know, this is what we're starting to see around the world. So I feel like South America is one of those places where you can get really, really close to nature and really close to wildlife and animals and all of that. But I'd love to ask each of you, what is your favorite place? Like if you could just go right now, what would be the one place? And I'm gonna make you say one, okay?
Okay, just one.
One place. Just one place. Marika, I'll start with you.
Oh, starting with me, because I've got three picked out.
I know.
I know. Well, little preamble, our bread and butter is the Galapagos Islands. And so I have a favorite island in the Galapagos, which is Genovesa.
Mm.
And it's just a phenomenal island to visit. But I want to talk about a place in Patagonia that is unique to Patagonia. And it's the little town of Ushuaia, the city. And it's the gateway to Antarctica. And it's also a gateway to Tierra del Fuego. And I had the opportunity to be there this last year, and I was so impressed with the quaintness of the town, the hikes that are possible, the location of it, the ability to visit lakes, and there we stayed at a place that had an infinity pool where you could look out over the entire Beagle Channel and watch the clouds and storms roll in. And it was just very charming and very worth spending a couple of nights, because walking in the subpolar forest was such a treat. It was intimate. The trees aren't giant, they're smaller because of the climate. And we'd be walking on a trail, and then a herd of horses would just run by, gallop by in the middle of nowhere, as if they were wild horses. They're not, they're all managed. But it's also a resort town in the winter with ski areas and Nordic skiing. And from there, you can travel to Antarctica. It's like a vast majority. Ushuaia. Sorry, I probably pronounced it incorrectly. But the vast majority of all Antarctica trips depart from there. Most people fly in and from Buenos Aires, and they board their yacht immediately, and they don't spend any time. Maybe they have a lunch in Ushuaia. But it's considered the most southern city in the world. It has the most southern national park in the world at the Tierra del Fuego National Park, which is expansive and beautiful for hiking. There's a little train that goes from the village to the park. And I was on my way to Antarctica, and also to the fjords of Tierra del Fuego. There's a cruise that ends in Punta Arenas, so it's sort of the gateway to Torres del Paine as well, if you do that route. And well worth spending some extra time if you're in Patagonia.
Yeah, I've been there myself, actually. It's a beautiful place, and it's the end of the world. Is what they call it. Yeah, yeah. Chris, what's your favorite place that you would recommend?
I told you before we started, I cannot say my favorite, but I will talk about one place. You know, we go in South America, Central America, we go to, you know, Torres del Paine, we go to the Galapagos, we go to Machu Picchu, and we go to Costa Rica. I love all of them for different reasons. However, I think I will talk a little bit about Machu Picchu, because I think it has received so much publicity over the years that I think many people have an image of it and think I know all about it. Okay. And I almost, when I went there the first time, I had an image myself. Okay. And I thought, well, I should go and see what it's really like. But I wasn't that excited about going, to tell you the truth. I thought I can, I've seen the pictures. When I got there on one of our volunteer trips, I was stunned. I mean, because it's one thing to see all these pictures, it's a totally different experience to actually be up in the Citadel and look around and see it in context. It was far more moving than I ever expected it to be. I also, because of my love of hiking in the Sierra, I like to hike in high altitude. So above tree line, so you can see. I'm big on being able to see. And high above tree line in the Sierra Nevada and California, we have granite. We have so much granite, you could never get tired of granite. I love granite. And when I saw the stonework at Machu Picchu and realized the craftsmanship that went into carving the granite, which is extremely hard, and fitting these huge boulders together as if they were blocks made for each other, I couldn't stop looking at them. I kept thinking, how did they do this? And of course, there's a mystery, but it was explained, of course. But how do they even get the boulders from where they were carving them to get them into place? So I found myself totally caught up in this whole idea of, I now understand why the Incas built this citadel where they did, once I saw it. When I realized what went into building it, I was just so impressed with the Inca that they could do that. This civilization could create something this wonderful. And although many people see sort of staged photographs of Machu Picchu, or they see Machu Picchu jammed full of people, which is what it often is, as volunteers, we spend a lot more time there. We don't go through the half a day tour where everybody marches one behind the other and sees it. We're there all day long, and we're there several days in a row. And I have to say that as all the tourists fade away and they're rushing back to catch their train, to catch the bus, to catch the flight back out of there, we're standing there in this peaceful, magnificent place. And it's just stunning. You feel connected. So to me, it was amazing. And I also have to say, we have a guide who is the most humble person I've ever met, who is incredibly patient with me. So if I want to stand there and look at this, try to figure out how did these boulders get put together, he'll let me stand there and look at it as long as I need to.
Yeah.
And he'll answer all my dumb questions. So, I mean, for a lot of reasons, I really love Machu Picchu. I also have to say that we, as a volunteer organization, get into places in Machu Picchu that other people can't go. We are often on the terraces where none of the tourists are allowed to go because of the work that we're doing to help maintain it. So we see it from a different perspective than what other people will see. There's one thing I want to talk about, though, because I know one of the questions, Carolyn, you asked was about biodiversity at the places we go. And this is my chance to plug something which is the antithesis of biodiversity. And that is something that people don't associate with Machu Picchu, and it's invasive species. Because Machu Picchu suffers from having a grass which is highly flammable, which is an invasive species, and the place could burn down, to be, to say it very, succinctly and boldly. We are helping them remove this invasive grass to protect the park so that it will be there for the next generations. And that's part of it. It feels like a continuum from way back in the Incas, in the 1500s to here we are now, trying to preserve it for generations down the road.
Yeah, well, I don't know, Katie, if you're going to talk about Galapagos, but I mean, that's a lot of the issue in Galapagos is all the invasive invasive
Yeah.
species there too. But Katie, what would be your choice for your favorite place?
Well, I can tell you, since living in Ecuador for 14 years, it's really hard to choose one place because my husband's family says I'm more Ecuadorian than he is now. And I've just fallen in love with this country. And, I went to Colombia in February, and I have to say that it totally took me by surprise. I would really say that I say it's lesser known because when you think of, and this is because I also come from the United States. I came from a small town in northern Maine on the border of Canada. Nobody thought I was ever going to leave that small town of 1,200 people and live in a South American city. So for me, growing up in the US, Colombia is off limits. Like, no, you don't go there. It's full of drugs. It's terrible to go there. And I have to tell you that when I went, I was like, oh, Colombia's going to be just like Ecuador. We're right next to each other. Green, Andes. Yeah, it has the beach, it has Cartagena. But I was blown away by the people, by the cities, by the energy these people have and how they are so ready to just let their past go. They are not 80s Colombia. They are Colombia now. And Colombia is beautiful. It is colorful. It is joyful. It is just has this energy that you can't help but feel it and be happy. And we were walking through the airport and the TSA agent was dancing and happy to see us. You don't see that anywhere. So I mean, Colombia is a big country. It's bigger than Ecuador, and there's a lot of places. But if I had to nail it down, I would say Medellin is also another one of those cities that is on everyone's list that you shouldn't go to. But there's so many stories and people that you connect with. I still remember everyone's name that I met. Martita was a lady I did a cooking class with. And she was just so full of life and has her own garden. And you cook with her, and it was the most delicious meal I've ever had. While walking through her garden, I don't know what possessed me to have tears, but it was just so beautiful, her way of life and everything that she did. And then on the other side of Medellin, the next day, we went to something similar to what Comuna 13, the Barrio 13 would be, but completely different. And it's a community that used to be powered by drug lords, used to be one of the most dangerous places to visit. But they have transformed their community into the most beautiful artwork that you've ever seen. And on every single mural of every single house, they have painted the story of the person who actually lives there. So the woman with the fruit basket and the painting of her on the wall is the woman who actually lives in that house or who lived in that house. There's a picture of children playing games in the street, and that was the story of an older gentleman when he was younger saying, imagine the day where we can play outside and watch the birds, and now they can, so it's this whole transformational story. And our guide Pablo lived there his whole entire life. He's a social leader in Colombia, and there's just so many heartwarming stories and connections everywhere you go in Colombia. It's unreal. So for me, Colombia is just that place. I'm still reeling from the experiences that I had, and Cartagena is another beautiful place to visit. There's so much history, and the culture and the people are they're just happy to see you. They don't care if they've never met you before, but they take you in as if you're family. And that's not an exaggeration. That's just how people are. It's just,
yeah. I actually put Medellin on our top places for women to go on our 2024 list because, like you, I was amazed at what you think it is and then what you experience when you're there.
I was blown away.
This is what we always try to encourage, right? Is talk to people who have been there. Don't just read the headlines. And you're right, Medellin has its own wonderful energy going on, and they're rebuilding that city. And while still acknowledging the past. You know, it's not like the past
Yeah,
went away. In
like
fact, it's
there's
therapeutic, I think.
yeah, they acknowledge their past, but they make sure to tell you that that's not who they are, and they're ready
Yeah.
to show you who you are. And a lot of the culture has come from that expression of being able to dance on the street because 40 years ago they couldn't do that. So I mean, they're just so proud to show who they are and what they can do, and their way of expressing that, you know, their storytelling is just phenomenal. The way that they can connect with you. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. There's a question in the chat and that Jordan asked about crowds in popular locations. And of course, this is a concern in the Galapagos, Machu Picchu, other places in South America. How do you all handle that when you're designing these trips, or what are your recommendations for women who, in terms of when to go and how to go and to be considerate when you travel?
Who wants to go first?
I'll dive into it.
Right? Yeah.
Well, the Galapagos is a destination that is very regulated. At least the yachts are very regulated by the Galapagos
Mhm.
National Park, and they define how many vessels can be at a particular visitor site at one time. No yacht can be at a same visitor site more than once every 2 weeks. It's very regulated. So the chances that you're going to encounter other travelers in that destination are small. Compared to other destinations that don't have that same regulation in place. I know in Patagonia at Torres del Paine, if you travel in December through February, it's going to be packed. The trails will be sort of like take a number and wait in line. It's so dense. So I highly recommend paying attention to shoulder seasons so that you have the incredible experience, but with fewer people. It's like if you went to Lake Louise in August, you'd be 6 to 8 deep to see the lake. But if you went in the autumn, you have the beautiful fall colors,
Hmm.
and you have the experience of being at the lake by yourself. It's if you have the ability to travel in a shoulder season, I would highly recommend it, because there'll be just fewer demands on the destination in terms of infrastructure during those times. The rates will be lower and you'll have fewer encounters with other travelers.
Mhm.
Katie, we're
Right.
gonna.
Yeah, just to clarify, like a shoulder season, in case no one, if there's someone that's not familiar with that, that means just before or after the peak season. And South America is so diverse when it comes to the different countries that each country is going to have their peak season at maybe a different time. So just if you are interested in Patagonia, Peru, Machu Picchu, you know, there's a rainy season. Galapagos
Mm.
also has their different varieties, but Galapagos is amazing to visit any time of year because there's always something going on with the animals and the breeding and the underwater, you know, the currents coming up from Antarctica and stuff like that. So I agree with Marika about the shoulder season. Less crowds, sometimes lower rates depending on what you're looking for and looking to do. I was gonna add something else, so maybe Chris, you wanna go ahead because I kind of lost my train of thought there. I can go after.
Yeah, there are many recommendations, of course, about how to, be careful with your valuables, et cetera. And I think most travelers already know that. I would say we have a somewhat different situation because we are traveling as a volunteer group. One thing is, obviously, we have no authority to do anything in these marvelous places. Okay, they belong to the local people. Machu Picchu belongs to the Peruvians, not to us. We are there with their permission. And what that means is that we are there working with the local community. Okay. And that's true in all of our destinations. We are never an insular group. We are in every one of our destinations working with the important stakeholders. If what we're doing does not help them, they would not want us to be there. So because we're working closely with local people, we really have not had any problems on our trips. I'll say the other thing is that even though you mentioned Torres del Paine being jam-packed in certain months, for example, we built a new trail in Torres del Paine, which is now open to the public. But when we built the Scottsburg Trail, we were in a marvelous, incredible part of the park with views of the Cuernos every day, and nobody was allowed there but us. Okay, we were building the trail on our own. And it's actually true in some of the other destinations as well, that we're not, even in what you might think of as crowded season, we're not necessarily crowded. Like in Machu Picchu, as I said, we may well be in terraces where nobody else is there. So anyway, I just haven't really found it an issue, but I think it also speaks to the idea that traveling with somebody else is always helpful in terms of staying safe.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I do want to talk about safety. Sorry, Katie, I want to switch to you
That's okay.
anyways, because I do, because what I did, so I went on a trip with Rebecca Adventure Travel last summer and went to the Amazon. And I think some people may not realize you can access the Amazon in Ecuador. So I wonder if you could speak to that, because it's definitely a less crowded alternative than
Yes.
other places.
Yeah, the Amazon, for example, a lot of people don't realize that Ecuador has a huge part of the Amazon, and sometimes when people refer to the Amazon, they might think of Peru first. And the really nice thing about Ecuador is that a lot of guests that come, even with us recently, is that they have no idea just how many different things that there are in Ecuador, including the Amazon, and it's one of the most biodiverse places, and the amount of animals that you can actually see in Ecuador is just so, the Amazon rainforest is very large, right? So you have a dense amount of animals, and doesn't mean that you're going to see them, you know, like you would in Galapagos, right in front of your face. They are camouflaged. But when you go to the Amazon from Ecuador, it's an easy flight, 30 minutes from the capital, from Quito, where most people arrive. And you have the option of 4 to 5 days staying at a lodge, or doing a river cruise, or even combining the two of them. And these are places that are working with the local communities, teaching them about conservation, how to protect the Amazon rainforest. They are working with the people so that they, you know, they're proud to show what is their home. So it's not something where you go in, it's a show where they have monkeys ready to jump on your back and take a picture, or here's an anaconda. No, this is an ethical experience where you can arrive and actually see the Amazon for what it truly is, and learn from the people, hear their stories, what their struggles are, while also being surrounded by this beautiful energy in one of the most important rainforests in the world. The Amazon are the lungs of the world, of the planet. And the Amazon was actually originally one of the places that I was going to say is my favorite. Because there's just an energy in the forest and in the lagoons and the rivers of the Amazon that is just can't be described. You have to see it and feel it for yourself. So, yeah.
I will never forget seeing pink tarantulas on the trees at night, and then being told that they jump. I was like, oh, good thing they're on the trees. And then they said, oh, but they'll jump. And I went, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is an incredible experience. And I loved being on a riverboat. So we moved around on the water the whole time.
No
I thought that was
crowds.
just amazing. Yeah, no, not at all.
And that's just something I wanted to add to the original question of the crowds, is that when you use a tour operator, especially, you know, that are B Corp and are focused on the local communities, you're not going to be that typical tourist crowd visiting all the highlights in a group. You know, it's not your Walmart tour, it's not your cookie cutter tour that's the same shape for everybody. They're personalized. They're going to places where the huge tour companies that go visit the same places all the time and causing erosion, causing, you know, too much traffic in these places. They're going to go to, maybe they want to see Rainbow Mountain, for example, in Peru. They're not going to go to Rainbow Mountain. You might go to Paraguay, where there's way less people, more of a cultural experience. And that happens to us all the time, is that we take people to places that are otherwise not found on the internet and that are not that popular. There are more places where you're going to connect with the people. You're going to have that cultural interaction that you're never going to forget. So that's just something
Yep.
really important, that you're not going to fall into those crowds where it's dangerous or safety is a concern. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about safety for a minute, because I'm curious if any of you has any kind of safety advice to share, and I'll share a story. I actually just posted this on our Facebook group, because I encountered a safety issue here in London today, and I wanted to share it. And it reminded me of Quito, where I was told, and it happened to me, where I had somebody throw pigeon poo all over me in Quito. And thank goodness I knew ahead of time that this was a scam to rid me of my jacket, my clothes, and everything. And I just kept it on and kept walking. And instead of the people coming up to me offering me Kleenexes and everything. And sometimes you go to places and they have these things, in the culture that, or in the cities that, become kind of endemic or epidemic, like here in London with people riding by and grabbing your phones on bikes, which is what's happening here. Have any of you ever encountered safety, issues, or could you share maybe a tip or advice, for a woman that might be going on her own to anywhere in South America or Central America? And there was a question here about El Salvador specifically, if anyone can answer that.
Well,
I find
regarding
that,
those, go
yeah,
ahead.
okay, no, go ahead. I find that people seem to be more concerned about in situations that they hear about in the news than they are about the places they're familiar with in their home environment.
Yeah.
So people
Mhm.
like, are, because there was issues in Ecuador recently that that were in the news and still present, and we had some guests ask, "Is it safe?" And then we asked, "Well, where do you live?" And you have to, it's like, so it's being aware of your surroundings is key, no matter where you live and where you
Mhm.
travel. It
Yes,
is
I agree.
generally sometimes safer because of the type of issues that you might encounter, pickpockets or these scams, that if they're well known, you're prepared for them. Um, Compared to some of the situations that happen in places we're more familiar with in our home cities. Um, I find it's like, you know, keep your valuables close, or like in the safe, in the hotel. Don't bring them out with you. Don't wear flashy jewelry.
Yeah.
Travel with your documents and your money close to your body, and pay attention to what's going on around you.
Yeah. It's all about paying attention to your surroundings. If you do go out on your own, for example, in the city of Quito, I've lived in Quito for 14 years. I am a blonde hair, blue eyed girl who goes out all the time, and it's easy to see that I'm not originally from here. But I can honestly tell you that nothing has ever happened to me, because I've always known where I'm going. I look it up on a map if it's somewhere I'm not familiar with, and I know how to get there, where to go. And I don't talk to strangers, and I just keep going on my way. Um, and for the most part, the people in South America are very friendly
Mhm.
and warm and
Mhm.
welcoming. And you're not going, and when you travel, you're not going to be coming into contact with the political issues that are happening. So, for example,
Mhm.
I agree with Marika and what has happened with Ecuador, and I know it was all over the news, and we're unfortunately still experiencing the effects of that, because requests have just come down to an all-time low since the pandemic. And it's really hard to explain to people, well, the crime rate in Chicago, a city in Illinois, is higher than the crime rate in all of Ecuador. So that's just a statistic to keep in
Yeah.
mind when you and travel to a new place in South America, is that we're not going to be sending you to places where you're going to feel or even see what's going on. It has nothing to do with tourism and the destinations you're going to be visiting. So keep that in mind, not just for Ecuador, but Colombia and other places as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, even I was there right after the presidential election, and
Yeah.
I never felt that little incident in Quito. I would never want to paint any country with the same brush. And I just mentioned that because I think it is kind of something that happens that I heard about from multiple people, and then it happened to me. So that's my experience. But I think we see this with a lot of countries where we read a headline and then we say, oh, that country is not safe, and that's something we should stop doing, because all of you are, you are in those places, and we should rely on you for information, I think.
Yeah, I would add that I agree with everything that Katie and Marika said. And I'll add one other thing. I get calls from people who've signed up for our trip sometimes, and certainly we had a lot of questions about the Galapagos over the last year. Is it safe to go? I feel confident in saying, understand that our trip leaders who come from the US, we send them there. I love our trip leaders. Without our trip leaders who are volunteering their time and their spirit, we would not have a mission. We would not be able to accomplish our mission. And I would never send somebody I love into an unsafe situation. If we are going to run the trip, I expect you will be as safe as the people I care about, who I know already. I don't know you yet, okay? So I think that's part of it, that you need to think about what is the people who are taking you there, what do they have at risk? That in some senses is one assurance for travelers.
Yeah. We have tons and tons of safety tips. Someone's talking about registering with STEP. It's the same thing with Canadians. Of course, we have a registration service as well. So definitely want to do all those things. Chris, I want to talk for just a moment about the trip that I am doing with you later this year in Costa Rica, which I'm very excited about. If anyone has read my articles about Mexico, I love turtles, sea turtles. And so could you share what you're going to do to me when I'm down there volunteering with you?
Okay, well, this is actually a wonderful opening to address an issue that many people worry about before going on a volunteer trip. Some people start worrying about, how hard is it going to be? Are you going to work me all the time? Am I going to have a good time? Okay. I just want to go back again and say, we have many repeat volunteers, and that's what we want. So our focus is, I will tell you, all of our trip leaders will say it at the beginning of every trip. Number one, our focus is safety. Without safety, you're not going to have a good trip, and nobody else is either. Number two, we want you to enjoy the trip. And number three, we want to be productive and help the destination. And our goal is to accomplish all three. Okay. So we start in San Jose, we go over to the West Coast, we go down the West Coast all the way to Punta Banco, and stopping along the way because it's a long way. And we have a local guide who's known for spotting wildlife. So bring your camera, bring your binoculars, and you'll see some great wildlife. And then in Punta Banco, we help, essentially in Costa Rica, there are local communities who are essentially licensed, if you will, and under guidance from the Costa Rican government about trying to preserve sea turtles, which are endangered. So they have a community there that works to preserve the sea turtles. We work with the nests that are on the beach, trying to relocate the eggs from the nest, protect them until they're hatched. And then the part that seems to thrill people the absolute most is participating in releasing these tiny, tiny little turtles back on the beach and watching them waddle off into the ocean. Okay, that's really the focus of it. There are a lot of activities in order to maintain a turtle hatchery. Okay, so cleaning the hatchery beds, excavating the nests. There's a lot of ancillary, I'm going to say, behind the scenes activity, which you will meet the local folks there who are very enthusiastic about it and will tell you all about it. And they're going to want to have a party where they dance with you at the end of it. So, you know, it's going to be a good experience. And then when you leave there, you're going to go back up to San Jose through the highlands and stop off at a place where it's known for the quetzal nesting. And you will help to build quetzal nests in order to, again, help preserve the quetzal population in Costa Rica. People, we get some very good reviews, and don't worry about working too hard, although you will definitely feel that you contributed at the end of the trip. Okay, that's our goal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it, and it's the first time I've done this kind of volunteer trip. So so I hope everyone on this call, I'll be posting about it on our group and of course writing about it. But any final questions that anyone has, please do put them in the chat. And if we don't get them to them now, we can certainly answer them afterwards. But I just want to end on inviting everyone to say a final word. You know, I think hopefully on this webinar, we've opened your eyes to some new experiences in South America, made you feel it can be a safe and exciting experience. And as I said at the very beginning, I feel like this is, you know, when you want to get connected to nature and people and wildlife, this is just the place to do it. So Marika, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd like to remind people that South America is incredibly diverse. If you put it against North America, it pretty much goes from the top of Canada down to the Darien Gap. Vast differences, vast variety, and it's relatively unexplored and unknown compared to Europe, North America, Asia, whatnot. And so come and discover something new. And take your time. Don't try to see all of South America in one trip, because you're going to spend your entire time in the plane, on the bus, and whatnot. Come to one location and really investigate it. In our Galapagos trips, it's 9 days just for Galapagos. Patagonia, don't rush Patagonia. Don't try to do Patagonia and Peru. It's just not. It's like trying to do Mexico and Canada on the same trip and call it, I've seen North America. So I would advise that, because
Yeah, I love that.
take your time.
I love that.
Yeah,
And also get disconnected too. I think when you're in the
Mhm.
Galapagos and when you're in some of these places, you are going to be disconnected, which is something we all need right now. So Katie, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I totally agree with Marika, because, you know, if you're going to make the time and effort to come to South America, it should be well spent getting to know the people, the place, the food, because that's really, you know, through the food, through your senses, taste, sound, hearing, all of that is something that you can really take back home with you and experience hands-on. And it's really not worth the trip to just be jumping around all trying to cover the highlights. That's that crowd mentality that we were talking about earlier. So you know, Ecuador, for example, is home to 4 completely different regions of the Amazon, the Andes, the Pacific Coast, and the Galapagos. And there's a lot of people who even come to Ecuador more than once just to be able to see it all, because they never realized how many different indigenous groups and cultures there are. And the same thing happens with Peru. You have Machu Picchu and Cusco, but then you also have Lake Titicaca and Puno and Arequipa and the highlands of Peru, and then the Pacific coast of Peru. So I mean, there's just so much in South America that really is explored, but not explored to the extent of what Marika said, you know, with the US, Canada, and Europe. It's just, and the people are beautiful, warm, caring, and you know, you make friends for life down here.
Yeah, and we did get to, there's so much we didn't get to tonight, you know, but the how to get there is not as complicated as we might think. And so anyways, Chris, anything to end on?
I think I would end on a note to say, if you look around the world at places that have been set aside as public lands, especially as national parks in countries, these are the lands that the country itself has decided is its most special place. That's why it was set aside as public lands. And public lands around the world need help. Even in the US, there are huge backlog. We're a rich country. There's a huge backlog of maintenance, and every public land here needs volunteer help. So imagine the less well-off countries, they do need help. And really, when you visit these marvelous places, think of them in terms of what you might be able to do to help, because they are set aside because they're extraordinary. And I think we all want them to continue to be available for future generations. They're the places where you get that awe moment, awe in the sense of awesome, but awe like, I just saw something I can't believe. I just smelled something. Oh my God, the smell of that pine tree was unreal. Okay. Or I saw an animal I never thought in my life I would see. There are so many opportunities for awe in the public lands. So I hope we all, wherever we are supporting public lands.
Wonderful. Great way to end. Thank you all for coming.
Thank
Our
you, Carol.
panelists and all of the
Thank you.
participants will be sending out contact information and more articles about South America to get you excited. And if you have any questions, we're here for you. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.